With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Now's the time to save 30% on wedding jewelry, only on BlueNile.com. Make sure your wedding ring is the one with your pick of diamond and lab-grown diamond bands, all hand-finished and graded for excellence. Or surprise her with something blue she'll love for life, like a stunning pair of sapphire earrings. Blue Nile's jewelry experts are available 24/7 to help, from fit questions to style advice. Right now, get up to 30% off at BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com.
Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we are finally going to wrap up the San Francisco 49ers 2024 NFL Draft Class Scouting Report. Started with Ricky Pearsall, pick 31 in the first round of this past year's draft, and we're going to end today with Tatum Bethune, linebacker out of Florida State, round 7, pick 251. We've gone through all draft picks of the San Francisco 49ers, dove into Pearsall and Cowing, the two receivers, talked about Renardo Green, Dominic Pooney, Jared Kingston, and others. And just look, this draft class as a whole, I think was pretty good. I think obviously we haven't seen them play just yet, but based off potential, based off fit, based off projections, I think the San Francisco 49ers, albeit may not be many's consensus top draft, I do think overall a lot of needs were filled. A lot of future needs were also hopefully met. And I do think overall San Francisco left the 2024 NFL draft feeling pretty good about where they were with their roster and with the incumbent rookies via the draft itself. Before we dive into Tatum Bethune, who he is, what his potential could be, is that maybe a Dre Greenlaw replacement, or is it more of a bench role for Bethune with his time in San Francisco? Time will tell, but please hit the like button and hit subscribe. We are 10 subs away from 1,000. Just 1,000. Niner Media, I see you in the chat. Bobo, I see you in the chat. Robbie439, I see you in the chat. I will get to you in just a second. But look, 10 subs away to 1K. Let's get there. Let's get there tonight, tomorrow, this weekend. Let's celebrate Father's Day with 1K. But first, Fluffy Ninja celebrating me. Thank you so much, Fluffy, saying, "Hey, Sterling, congratulations on the wedding. Many blessings to you both." Ironically, I don't have my ring on right now. It's sitting in the front room. I was doing some dishes, but thank you so much, Fluffy. I really appreciate it. Just over 2 weeks now, we've been married. It's been fun. Groceries are really expensive, but let's hope Tatum Bethune can pick us up, because that Costco trip today was not fun. When we got everything rung up and it was like, how much does that cost? But we'll see. Thank you so much, Fluffy. But let's dive into Tatum Bethune, linebacker out of Florida State, round 7, pick 251. He's 6 foot, 229 pounds. You would like your linebackers around 6'1 to 6'2. I don't want them too tall. Don't want them too short. You will usually want them as just under the size of a tight end and just larger than the average running back. So Bethune, I guess, kind of fits, I wouldn't say in the sweet spot, but towards the bottom half of good size for a linebacker. You like the 229. You just wish he was a little bit bigger, but because of his size, what's great with Bethune is, and this is one of the biggest reasons as to why San Francisco coveted him, is he is really, really good in coverage. A 38 passer rating allowed last season at Florida State. And also that size into account here, 4.69 speed, so he can chase down receivers. He can stick with tight ends. He can chase down running backs out of the backfield. He is someone that when you look at who San Francisco likes to take at the linebacker position, well, you think of Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, if you want to go deep and dark, Reuben Foster, right? But Azeez Al-Shire in that group as well as an undrafted free agent. Tatum Bethune fits that mold of maybe you don't have the best size, but you kind of fit more of a safety hybrid. You're really fast, you're good in coverage, and you can kind of work on his tackling, but Tatum Bethune is actually a really good tackler. He's strong and he's forceful. I don't see many worries in regards to Tatum Bethune missing tackles at the NFL level. Again, he has the density, if you will, to be a forceful tackle in the NFL. And look, with time, his body improves. He gets stronger. His body becomes an NFL linebacker compared to an SEC linebacker, which he was at Florida State. But going back to his size, his speed, his coverage skills, he is a linebacker that is not going to get fooled with misdirection. Works really well with it, or at least did at Florida State. He can come downhill quickly against the run. And I think, for a team that you're going to have to play, the Rams twice a year, and Seattle twice a year, and the Cardinals twice a year, and in a league where most teams now have adapted to the Shanahan style of offenses. They've brought over, many of the Shanahan, plays and schemes into theirs and kind of morphed to their liking. A lot of zone coverage, right? Tatum Bethune is really, really good in zone coverage. He has the fluidity to stick with, again, with running backs and tight ends and receivers in man coverage. So I know it's a 7th round pick, but to be honest with you, I don't see how anyone dislikes this pick. You want to talk about Jared Kingston's holes? Sure. You want to talk about concerns of first round receiver, but you have Debo and you have Ayuk. Why did you take Pearsall? Fine. Tatum Bethune, I know last year it was D. Winters and Jalen Graham. I could argue that Tatum Bethune coming into this year is probably already more consistent, or at least was more consistent at Florida State than D. Winters was at TCU and Jalen Graham was at Purdue. Now, that said, D. Winters and Jalen Graham do have 1 year already in the system. D. Winters playing off and on last year, and I expect some big things from them, but I could make the judgment Tatum Bethune might be able to come into this year as a rookie and at least jump one of them on the depth chart. And one of the reasons why I think so isn't just because of how good of a tackler he is, how good in coverage he may be, but he can play Mike linebacker. And I think that's one thing that holds D. Winters back. He wasn't really a Mike linebacker at TCU. Jalen Graham really isn't a good coverage skill linebacker. He's a thumper for sure, and I want to see Jalen Graham play at the line of scrimmage more, whereas Tatum Bethune, if he had to play this year, and look, he's a rookie, right? It's really hard to expect big things from a rookie linebacker. They're kind of like receivers in Kyle Shanahan's system. They take 1-2 years to get ready. Even Fred Warner, who is an all-pro, and the way he's playing, his career could lend its way to a Hall of Fame jacket one day, but he's certainly a perennial all-pro and Pro Bowler. Tatum Bethune is a 7th round pick, so how much do you expect from him, right? Well, I think he's not going to start year one, nor should he, right? But I do think the strengths that he currently has do translate to the NFL at a more consistent basis than D. Winters, who I love me some D. Winters. I'll always talk about, and I always have talked about, his tape against Michigan was phenomenal in the playoffs 2 years ago for TCU. The issue with him is how do you find consistency like that at the NFL level, because he wasn't showing it in college. The potential is certainly there, and Bethune does not have the potential that Winters has. Don't get me wrong, but I think Bethune is going to have a better shot at finding consistency earlier in his career than D. Winters has in 1 year so far at the NFL level. He is a high floor, low ceiling kind of player that can play Mike linebacker, where let's say all hell breaks loose this year, right? And Fred Warner gets hurt, Dre Greenlaw is already hurt, Devondre Campbell happens to go down, and you're left with Winters and maybe Curtis Robinson and Jalen Graham and Bethune. There's a really good chance that Winters and Bethune are your two linebackers this year, unless I'm forgetting somebody else like Demetrius Flanagan-Falls. It really does feel like Bethune could push Winters, Graham, and even Robinson, of course, who usually gets cut each year or is a practice squad player, for a roster spot. And look, I want to make it very clear. Tatum Bethune should not see the field in year one. And if he does, something has either catastrophically gone wrong with the defense and the linebackers specifically, or he's performed extremely well and is forced his way onto the roster in the lineup. That said, I do think that in a weird world where Dre Greenlaw doesn't come back healthy or isn't 100%, and Devondre Campbell doesn't kind of round back into form that he was 2 or 3 years ago with Green Bay, there is a world where Bethune gets on the field and, while yes, will struggle, I do think would actually surprise some, being a 7th-round pick all the way overall to 251. Again, I would say he's probably already on par with Winters and Flanagan-Falls as a special teamer. And if you really, really, really had to, I think he could start in a pinch, but even then, he's a rookie 7th-round pick. You wouldn't expect the world of him, in his first few weeks starting at the NFL level. I do like him more than Demetrius Flanagan-Falls, and I think opposite of D. Winters in a future where, Fred Warner's in his late 30s or mid-30s, Dre Greenlaw, who knows how his Achilles recovers, you hope he's back. I do think there is a world where, if everything goes perfectly, right, the opposite of the catastrophic season, if everyone gets hurt, if everything goes perfectly for Bethune and Winters in their careers, you could be looking at, a low-level starter in Bethune and a high-potential, starter in D. Winters in the future. Now, I'm not saying I want to pair those guys. I love Fred Warner. I want Dre Greenlaw to come back. And Devondre Campbell certainly gives you some depth behind those two players. But I do think there is a world where, Tatum Bethune, if D. Winters doesn't find consistency, if Devondre Campbell is a 1-year signing and is going to be gone next year, or, look, let's be honest, he's also aging, right? There is a world where Tatum Bethune does become the Dre Greenlaw replacement simply because he's there, by de facto, right? Where if Winters falls out, Jalen Graham, really hasn't been able, he's a safety transfer or convert over to linebacker. So there's going to be some bumps in the road, whereas Bethune is a pure linebacker from Florida State. He can play Mike. He's good in coverage. He has 4.69 speed, darn near 4.7 speed. There is a world where Bethune, if he has to start, whether Campbell goes down or someone else gets hurt, that people in the Niners could feel comfortable starting him and actually having him take over for a job where in next year, let's say it's in 1 year's time, you walk into 2025 with Fred Warner, maybe a hopefully then healthy Dre Greenlaw, and instead of Devondre Campbell or Curtis Robinson, you're waltzing onto the field with Tatum Bethune. That's a real chance or a real life possibility in my eyes. Now, a lot has to happen to get there, certainly. And I think, with where Bethune is at in the middle of June pre-training camp, that's kind of ballsy to say. But I'll go on a limb and say that, Devondre Campbell didn't show much last year for me. And I do like Devondre Campbell as a player, as a person. I just think he's getting older. He's not as fast as he once was, and his coverage skills have taken a dip. Now, was that Green Bay in their defense? He seems to think so, and he himself said he feels rejuvenated and found his love for football again. Time will obviously tell with his play on the field, hopefully translating to that. But even then, this year, there's a real chance that Bethune could jump Devondre Campbell, where if they feel like, hey, Campbell's 31, 32 years old, Bethune's 24, I mean, man, like what are we doing here? If their levels are the same or, Campbell's having fits like he did last year in Green Bay, why not play Bethune? But a lot of time to go. We're in June. Training camp's in like a month and a half. We have so much time to get out there. But I think Niner fans, you shouldn't expect too much from Tatum Bethune in year one, but I do believe that with what Tatum Bethune has, it's not amazing potential. He was a 7th round pick for a reason. That said, what he could bring is a little bit more consistency than Jalen Graham, than D. Winters, than Demetrius Flannigan-Falls, and if anything, his floor really just is a really good special team player, and every NFL team needs that, especially if you want to let a guy like Campbell or DFF walk in a year. So I like the pick. I mean, it's hard to nitpick a 7th rounder, let's be honest here, but I think with what Bethune has shown in FSU and Florida State, and I think what he can bring to the NFL level, I think Niner fans will be pleasantly surprised with what he actually becomes in a couple years. I was really surprised when Demetrius Flannigan-Falls stuck around for 4 or 5 years now. I have been shocked how much Curtis Robinson has been cut and brought back and cut and brought back and cut and brought back. I think Tatum Bethune is someone that could solidify at least the 5th linebacker role on this team, where his ceiling isn't high. You don't really want him to start, but if he does, you're not going to be too worried of, is Tatum Bethune actually doing his job? Again, high floor, low ceiling player, but to round out your roster in the 7th round with those guys, that's really good. Like, I know we're coming off of the Brock Purdy pick a couple years ago. 7th round pick, it's Brock Purdy. Bethune's not going to be an all-world linebacker. He just isn't unless something clicks at the NFL level, which it could, learning from Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. But, he's not the athlete those guys are. He is fast. He's 4.69 speed. I do think he lacks size. If he was 6'1 or 6'2, 230, we're talking the prototypical archetype for an NFL linebacker. But I think, what San Francisco likes, and you can talk to whether it's Shanahan or now Nick Sorensen, I'm sure Brandon Staley and others, and Johnny Holland being the linebackers coach, they will tell you that if you can cover, we want you. And Tatum Bethune, by all means, can cover. 38 passer rating allowed last year when targeted was really, really good. There's a reason why they brought him in for a pro day visit. There's a reason why they hosted him for a visit at Levi Stadium. And there's a reason why he was drafted here. San Francisco, of all positions, maybe outside of defensive end, late rounders, mind you, or defensive line with Chris Kocurek, has really found success finding linebackers, whether it be Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round, Demetrius Flannigan-Falls, Curtis Robinson, you hope D. Winters, Azeez Al-Shire is butting into a starting linebacker at the Mike position now. I have a really good feeling about the history that this regime has had with progressing linebackers, and also with Bethune's track record. There's a lot to like in what Bethune can bring to the Niners defense. Maybe not this year, but in a couple years' time, where, once Greenlaw hopefully heals, but if he can't, maybe Bethune is the replacement for Dre Greenlaw, be it a not as good athlete as Greenlaw is at Arkansas. I want to say what's up to the Niners Sickness Podcast. What's going on, man? I want to get on your show. Hit me in the Twitter DMs and let's talk about a time and date. I want to come on your show so badly. Let's make that happen. Niner Media says, congrats to my marriage. Thank you so much. Bobo says, happy marriage, buddy. Thank you so much, Bobo. Robbie, thank you so much as well. It's been fun. Marriage is different for me. I'm 27 years old. We've been dating for 6 years now married for 2. So with that comes new experiences. We've had to buy furniture and bedding and everything in the house. And you're like, wow, the bank account just starts to slowly drain. You're like, holy crap. But we're all happy here. We got the TV, all the streaming services, this makeshift new office studio. And thank you guys so much for allowing me to be in your homes or on your phones or on your drive to and from work as we have taken a step into my new form of life. Hopefully we can take a step into the new season with some gold on all of our fingers in 1 year's time, if you know what I mean. I mean a Super Bowl, for the love of God, please.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Bobo asks here, is Dre Greenlaw expected to play at some point this season? Yes. Now, I am someone that's a little hesitant. I know many would push back on this and say, well, he'll be ready by week number 1. Is it a possibility? Sure. I'm also close to a lot of people that have had torn Achilles, and it takes a long time. My father tore his Achilles. If you know Alan Stiles, who now works at in Sacramento, was at 95.7 the game. He tore his Achilles. And Jason Dumas, 95.7 the game in Cron, he just tore his Achilles. Like, those things can take a year to heal. Now, those guys aren't NFL athletes. No offense, Alan. But it just takes a long time where, yeah, it may say you have 6 to 8 months to recover, but it all depends on how your body heals, what doctors you have. My assumption is that by week 4 to 6 is when I think we start to get rumblings of Greenlaw coming off of IR. I do think the reason why Devondre Campbell and earlier in the offseason Michael Kendricks was supposedly signed was because they knew Greenlaw was going to miss time. And it'll be 1 year at the Super Bowl. So I would like to think, maybe you can go weeks 4 through 8. That's kind of a month timetable. I think you will hear rumblings of Greenlaw's return. And I think, what a better way to have a quote-unquote trade deadline acquisition in the form of Dre Greenlaw being should have been an all-pro a couple of years ago. He's one of the best linebackers in football. My only concern is that because Greenlaw plays with so much energy, that, there is a risk of him doing it again. Now, God, I hope not. But he hurt himself not actually playing, which worries me for him on the sideline. Like, Dre, just calm down. Relax, man. You don't have to be jumping and doing, cartwheels and whatever, karaoke on the sideline. Just stop. Just sit down and relax and enjoy the show, man. We need you on the field, not running onto the field. So he should play this year. I hope he does play. But I would expect that it's not going to happen until middle of the year, if not later on in the season. But again, I'm hoping. JD Durham says, congrats for the marriage. Says, don't ever resort to selling women's shoes. I'm not going to sell women's shoes. I did tell her she had to consolidate a lot of the things that she had and said, babe, you can't have 50 pairs of shoes. Let's make that 25. And of course, you get the eye of like, are you really trying to make me get rid of my stuff? And you're like, we don't have enough room. You gotta go from 50 to 25, please. So, I totally get what you're saying. Niner Sickness Podcast says, I've been married for 29 years, almost 30. Congrats to you, by the way. I hear you. And look, marriage is great. You find the person you love and you get to be with them all the time. Now, she's a teacher, so in a couple months, August-ish, maybe late July, she'll start going back and forth to school and I'll have the house to myself. So, it'll be a man's cave because I work from home. And so it'll be a little freedom, a little free time, I guess you could say, for me and the dog Stanley, who's sleeping behind me. But other than that, it's been really fun. Being around the same person every single day that you love so much is definitely a blessing. Comes with challenges, mind you, but definitely a blessing. Robbie here says, what a comeback if Greenlaw comes back for the playoffs and balls out. Wouldn't it be great? A la Aaron Rodgers with the American flag. Hopefully the outcome isn't the same, but Super Bowl was at 59 this year. It's Niners and Chiefs, and leading them out of the tunnel, it's Dre Greenlaw back for the first time, or I guess he couldn't come back in the playoffs, but one can wish, right? So, man, wouldn't that be special? Dre Greenlaw leading the team back out in the field. And look, am I the only one that... I know we lost against Kansas City twice, mind you, and both times have been equally just awful. I do want to play them again. Like, third time's a charm, right? I really do want to play them again. And it's funny because Bobo says this in the chat. Jimmy G tore his knee out running out of bounds versus Kansas City. Man, I mean, you're right, Bobo. To be fair, Jimmy was actually playing on the field and wasn't running onto the field. Jimmy was scrambling for extra yardage in week 2 or 3 of the NFL season in 2018. Because that was what they lost to the Vikings in week 1. They beat the Matthew Stafford Lions in week 2 at Levi's, and then he busted his knee week 3 against Kansas City. What a horrible time to be alive for Niner fans. But yes, anyways, I do want to get to Robbie's question at the top here, because Robbie asks what is seemingly the biggest news in football today, being June 13th. And I know this has turned into a Tatum Bethune Scouting Report into what about Trevor Lawrence's contract extension? What's your opinion on Lawrence's contract extension? This is tough because I do like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I think Trevor Lawrence is actually a pretty good quarterback, and I think that there is potential in him to be a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback. I mean, he has the archetype, he has the body, he has the build, he has the physical tools to be really good. And I know that his time in Jacksonville has been, I don't want to say tumultuous, but he had Urban Meyer for a year, I believe, and then he went to Doug Peterson, and there's been some ups and been some downs. And even Doug Peterson, I don't think is a great head coach, nor do I think is he the right head coach. He's not bad by any means, but I think if you are the Jacksonville Jaguars, you'd rather pair him with a young up-and-comer, or you get someone that's a big-name, guy, right? Now, who is that? I have no idea who's out there. I'm sure Ben Johnson will be great from Detroit. Wouldn't be nice to pry him away from the Lions, but I digress. Do I think it was an overpay? I think just like Brock Purdy's deal, you are paying a little bit for potential and projections, similar to Brandon Ayuk, right? You're paying a player who's in his mid-20s, early 20s that you expect to get better over time and hopefully can reach a higher peak within the new contract they get. But I mean, man, the fact that Trevor Lawrence is now equally or is on par with Joe Burrow's contract for, I think, they're tied for the highest contract ever for a quarterback. I love Joe Burrow as well, but there's injury history there, and I get why they paid him. For Trevor Lawrence's case, I mean, you'd never won a playoff game. Like, you can make a real argument that Trevor Lawrence, for all the talk of him being, the next great quarterback prospect and the next Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning, I think all those things are true in regards to what he could become, albeit Manning's probably a far stretch now. Trevor Lawrence, I would not call him a top 10 quarterback today, but I get what Jacksonville's doing. They have to pay for Trevor Lawrence because they tanked for him. They went through so many horrible seasons, and that includes the Blake Bortles years, where when you finally have the guy and you're a franchise like Jacksonville, who had gone through the Byron Leftwiches and David Garrards and Blake Bortles and Mark Brunells, despite their varying levels of success, you also had, who's the other guy? Blaine Gabbert, right? Once you find a guy you can actually believe in and buy into, you have to almost overpay for them. And so I do think it was a little bit of overpay because Jacksonville is Jacksonville and they're not the Patriots or the Jets or, the Niners or the Rams or, teams that have been successful in recent years or a big market team. It would be like, the Houston Texans, right? Although I think CJ Stroud is already, would rank higher on my board than Lawrence would. The Texans aren't a big market, right? And I love Houston and I love that team, but they seem to have their guy, and they're going to pay him a load of money because they're going to have to, one, to keep him, but also because he's earned it. So I do think it was an overpay. My bigger question is Brock Purdy going to get $300 million now? Because, Brock has been more successful than Trevor Lawrence. Now, mind you, different teams, different systems, but Trevor's never won a playoff game. And in fact, he blew a playoff game. Oh, no. They beat the Chargers. I'm sorry. They came back and beat the Chargers. They almost beat Kansas City. Duh. I'm dumb. I'm sorry. It's the marriage brain. That said, okay, you've won one playoff game, which is great. You're not better than Kansas City. You're not better than Cincinnati, in my opinion, when Burrow's healthy. You're not better than Buffalo, who is retooling. You're not better than Houston. Like, they're probably the second best team in that division. And I'm sure this is also a reason as to why they wanted to pay him. If the Colts, and if they have their guy in Anthony Richardson, and he hits and he's really good, which we'll see with his shoulder injury, then you may be the third best team in that division. So I think Jacksonville paid Lawrence based on, yes, him being good, yes, him being a former first overall pick, but also with fear of we cannot fall all the way back into obscurity because we didn't pay you. Now, keep in mind, the Cons who own Jacksonville are made of money, where they will give whoever they want to, like Eric Armstead, as Bobo points out, $50 million and gave Christian Kirk $20 million per year too. Now, I like the Christian Kirk deal. Do you have to overpay him to get into Jacksonville? Of course you do. But I don't think there's any state tax in Florida, so they get to keep more of that money. And the Cons, who own AEW and many other ventures out there in the world, they have plenty of money to spend. And I think that, they're a team in a market that, when you think of Florida football, you think of Tampa Bay, you think of the Dolphins, then you think of Jacksonville. In the AFC, Jacksonville, despite recent success of beating the Chargers in the playoffs and almost beating Kansas City a couple years ago in the playoffs, you probably would not think of them first. I would go with the Chiefs, the Chargers because of Harbaugh now, Peyton because of Denver. You look into, the Texans and Stroud, and you look at Josh Allen and the Bills and Tua and the Dolphins. You may not mention the Jaguars until team number 10 in their conference and in their division, maybe not until team 3. And, I think that's right. And Bobo, to your point, you think college football before you think of the Jaguars, right? So, they're the 5th team in that market, and that's just football, so they have to have something to hold on to there for their fans. And I think that, well, I guess it's an overpay for Lawrence. They had to. But all of that kind of, who cares about that conversation? Now I care about, Niner fans are in the midst of, are we going to pay Ayuk or not? Now it's like, holy crap. How are we going to pay Brock Purdy? Is Brock Purdy going to rightfully ask for $300 million? And look, I would not blame him for asking for that. Now, I don't think he will, mind you, but, does one team's overpay mean everyone has to overpay? No. But one team's idiocy, or idiocracy, if you will, does hurt other teams. Now, I'm not calling the Jacksonville Jaguars idiots, but because I think they had to make this move, but this also does put teams like San Francisco, like, why did they do that? like why did Christian Kirk get $20 million a year when he's been a glorified slot receiver, who I do like, mind you, but he's a slot receiver. Those guys don't deserve $20 million a year. Usually your ex-receivers get $20+ million a year. And so, we'll see what Brock Purdy asks for. And keep in mind, and again, I believe Florida doesn't have state tax. I could be wrong about that, but I don't live there, mind you. But California has like the highest state tax in the country. So if Brock Purdy asks for, $300 million, he ain't going to see half that money anyway. So I wouldn't put it past him to ask for $350 million because he's going to say, well, I want to make as much as Lawrence, but I got to get paid extra because of the state we play in, which isn't anyone's fault. It just is what it is. But it's like, man, so, and when you break it down, Purdy's been more successful than Trevor Lawrence. I just think, let's say you flipped teams, right? Let's say Purdy was in Jacksonville. I don't think he gets the contract Trevor Lawrence just got. I truly don't. I don't think, and I love Brock Purdy. I truly do. How could you not? But I don't think Brock Purdy gets a $295 million contract from the Jacksonville Jaguars, despite being the 7th round pick, Mr. Relevant. And I don't think he would have as much success in Jacksonville as he's had here. And I think Trevor Lawrence, would have equal to maybe a little lesser success than Purdy's had so far. But that's kind of splitting hairs, and you can't switch teams like that. So it's relevant. But I do think that, what Brock Purdy's worth to the Niners, you hate to play this game because Brock Purdy, it's a quarterback, the most important position in all sports, most likely, right? And we've seen the offense take and hit new strides with him on the field in this offense compared to Jimmy G and Trey Lance, Brian Hoyer, Mullins, and Beathard. So could you ask, is Brock Purdy worth as much to the Niners as Lawrence is to Jacksonville? Maybe it's equal, maybe it's less, maybe it's more. I think there's arguments for all of those. Now, with that said, you're still paying Brock Purdy a crap ton of money. Like the Brink truck is already being backed up, and he can't even get paid yet. So I think that for the Niners, what you will probably do is load that sucker up with guarantees at the beginning of the contract, front load that sucker if you have to, and really just kind of get all of Purdy's money out of the way early. That way, once he's into year 6 and 7, and if it is a 10-year deal, who knows, 6, 7, 8, 9, he's making chump meat, and you're like, oh, he's making nothing. We have this window's wide open, right? Kind of like Tom Brady did, where Tom Brady did take big money, but it was constant restructures. The way he structured contracts were, pay me all in the front that way, or pay me in all guarantees. That way I get to go home with the money in a bag and, have parties with Giselle, at least not anymore, but they used to, with the kids and whatnot. And, during the year, the Patriots could add whoever they wanted to, whether it be Moss, Welker, Dante Stallworth, pay Seymour, pay Vince Wilfork, go get Revis and Stephon Gilmore, and just add to that defense and offense constantly for Tom. Now, I know there's a lot of similarities in between Purdy and Brady, late round pick, success. The stories are incredible. I don't know if Brock Purdy's going to take the Tom Brady approach to a contract extension, mind you. I think that Purdy, for as humble as he is, for as good of a person as he is, he's going to want to get paid. And San Francisco is already preparing and paving that path to pay him, which begins, or has already began, right? That was restructuring Christian McCaffrey. It could be the eventual restructuring of an extension of Trent Williams. It could be, extending Juwan Jennings and restructuring Kittle and Fred Warner and others to open the door. And I think, the eventual hopeful extension of Ayuk opens that door further, where they do front load the crap out of that contract for Brock Purdy to, again, keep the window open for a long time, where if in year 1 they have all this money to spend, cool, great. But in year 2, that cap continues to go up. A lot of the money's out of the way, and you just move forward, right? So we'll see. Hurricane, I believe it's Starang, right? Says, just came here to say I'm a really big fan of Tatum. I think he's going to have a crazy rookie season. He's referring to Tatum Bethune, who was what this video was actually about initially. And look, I don't know if Bethune's actually going to have an amazing rookie season, but I agree with you, Hurricane Starang, that the building blocks are there for a solid rookie season for a player that nobody should expect anything from. Now, what is that level of success? We shall see. But I do think he has the skill set to translate to the NFL better than most 7th-round linebackers. And I think that Niner fans will be pleasantly surprised with him if he's given a chance to play in year 1, and hopefully in a couple of years, finds his way as the linebacker 3 or 4 and does get a chance to show what he can actually do. Because I really do think that, he's not going to blow you away, but I think that the skill set he has will translate smoothly to the Niners defense and the NFL. Hurricane Starang also says Brock Purdy will get 6 years, $230 million. What is that? Just under $40 million a year, if my math is correct. I could see that. I don't think San Francisco is going to give Purdy $50 million a year. I have a hard time believing that. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong here, right? I think Lawrence and Burrow are getting $55 a year when it's all put together, which isn't really accurate, but the average of the contract. I was really shocked to see Lawrence get that much. In my mind, I go, okay, Purdy's better than Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk got, 100 over 4 years, so about 25 mil a year. So, okay, maybe Purdy gets around $35 million a year. I think that's a fair compensation for a guy who's done nothing but been successful since he got to the NFL. And I know CBS Sports put out that thing today where like, we expect regression. Yeah. It's really hard to repeat a near MVP season. You really said much there. And all due respect to whoever wrote the article, but like every year a player wins the MVP, you should expect them to not be the same afterwards, right? Like it doesn't mean they're not good. Like Tom Brady, I think has won what? He's won a ton of MVPs, right? Every year he was phenomenal, basically. And he wasn't winning the MVP. Aaron Judge, if you want to go to baseball, set the AL home run record. He's never hit that record again, but he's hitting like 310 this year with like 24 home runs already. Like, it's not like because you don't repeat an MVP type year that you're bad. In fact, it can mean you're great. It just means that somebody else was having a crazier season than you, and that could easily be Christian McCaffrey. So it's not like it would hurt San Francisco in the long run if McCaffrey or Purdy both won, or one of them won the MVP and one of them took a back seat for half a year. So, yeah, I could see 6 years, 230 for Brock Purdy. Now, I do not have the quarterback contracts up in front of me, mind you, but I do think that where this is all heading, I don't think Brock Purdy is going to have this long, drawn-out offseason of will they, won't they? Like, they didn't do that for Jimmy G. And San Francisco acted quickly to go get Trey Lance. Now, Trey Lance obviously wasn't given a massive contract. He was drafted. I think where San Francisco, of all the positions, if they find a quarterback they like. Now, to be fair, Jimmy G was going to be a free agent. He could sign anywhere they wanted him, or he could have left for anybody he wanted to, which made San Francisco have to get ahead of things. But that same thing goes for Brock Purdy, right? So I think that San Francisco is going to pay Brock Purdy, I think, relatively quickly after the year's over. They want to avoid a quarterback holdout, him not being in camp. Like, there are certain positions you can get away with guys not being in camp. Receiver being one of them. Wink, wink, Brandon Ayuk. What you can't do is you can't have your quarterback miss camp and then go, I'm ready for week one. No, you're not. No, you're not. You lose chemistry, you lose timing, you lose your rhythm. Like, I think $35 to $40 million is a good spot for Brock Purdy. Now, again, I have no idea who's getting, all the in-betweens. I know it's Burrow and Lawrence tied for the top and everybody else. So I think, Purdy getting around 35 to 40 is a good number. Niner Sickness Podcast says this: Brock Purdy's numbers won't be as good, but he'll play better this season. Define play better, because usually that means your numbers are good or equal to, or if not better. I don't know if San Francisco's going to go back to the Super Bowl this year, which I guess would imply better. I think, and even then, it's not like Purdy had many flaws. Purdy's biggest flaw was not having Debo for 3 games and Trent for 3 games, and maybe playing poorly in the rain. I do think that there is an opportunity for him this year to, you're going to play teams again. This is your 3rd year now in the NFL, right? This is you had, the back end of your first season after Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, and you had last year. You're going into your 2nd full season as a starter, and Purdy's greatest strength is his processing. I think that in big moments where, last year sometimes the offense may have sputtered in spots where they put up 35 points or 28 points, but it could have easily been 40, could have easily been 50. And I think that's where we might see a lot of the consistencies pick up with him, where, we're not going to see as much of the offense sputter. Here we go. Niner Sickness Podcast says this to clarify: better in a sense that he'll make better decisions. He will get the ball into tighter spaces, and I believe he'll run more when the coverage breaks down. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that, again, that kind of goes what I was saying, where, when the game gets tight, Purdy's great. He's really clutch. And to be fair, it's not like they played a lot of tight games this year, but I do think that there was a lot of times, mainly in the Super Bowl, where the offense was kind of a non-factor. And I think we will see that go away. Now, I don't know if Purdy's going to hit, 40 touchdown passes or whatever, but I do think that you are going to find times where in previous years where the offense did kind of find itself stuck in the mud, them getting out of that quicker. And I think that comes back to processing, seeing the game for us, now 3 seasons or 2.5 years now. And I think that, having a full off season, no injury, there's no reason as to why maybe Purdy's numbers don't look better, but there is a more precise version of Brock Purdy coming into the year. And I think against teams like Buffalo and Green Bay in the winter, we'll see that. I think against teams like Kansas City, where he gets keep in mind, Brock Purdy has never lost to the same team twice, right? And so I think, or consecutive times. So I think that, him seeing Spagnuolo's defense one time, I think he's kind of, that middle of the year matchup against Kansas City back at Levi's, I think is going to be one to watch in regards to how does Brock Purdy tackle a Steve Spagnuolo defense who gives you every look in the book and can somehow still disguise it. Facing that the second time, how does Brock Purdy look? I think if Purdy excels, even if they lose, I think if Purdy excels and can kind of face the second half adjustments Spagnuolo throws at him, I think that's where we will see Brock Purdy, take that next step of he's good. Now he's really good. The NFL world somehow still doesn't respect him, which is so frustrating, right? Where I think it was Chris Sims, which, funny enough, being Kyle Shanahan's friend, had Brock Purdy ranked 17th. And I was like, bro, 17th? Behind Kyler Murray, who I like more than most do. But man, it's almost disrespectful to not have an MVP finalist. He finished 4th last year. To have them 17th. MVPs, yes, are a quarterback category usually, but Christian McCaffrey finished 3rd. It's not like that the award MVP doesn't encompass every single position, and yet Brock Purdy finishes 17th in his own position, where he finished 4th in the entire league last year. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think that we will see that come to fruition of, I think, a lot of the national media, where the story's great, he's a darling. I think they'll finally start to understand how good Purdy actually is. And I don't want to say buy into him, but I do think that, it was really tough to watch ESPN and Fox last year and others, because it was just you're saying things, but you don't actually know what you're talking about Brock Purdy. Did you actually watch the games? Because he's annihilating 90% of the defenses he's playing. And even Chris Sims used the Packers game of, San Francisco had Jordan Love, they would have won the Super Bowl. And if Jordan Love would have beat Brock Purdy and not thrown 2 picks in the divisional round game, they'd have played Detroit. A lot had to go wrong for Green Bay. A lot had to go right for Niners. That's how football works. You can say the exact same thing about Detroit. You can say the exact same thing about San Francisco against the Chiefs. Had you just scored one more touchdown, you would have won the game in regulation. Yeah, no duh. What an analysis that was. Thank you. You told me nothing I already didn't know. Cool. A question here. If Brock has the same or better numbers than last season, can we agree he will get paid less or no less than $50 million per year? Well, that truly depends on where you view Brock Purdy amongst the NFL quarterbacks, right? There are plenty of people that would look at Brock Purdy and would view him as 17th, like Chris Sims, and would pay him like that, or would pay him, the underlying market value, right? And so I would say that Brock Purdy, if you look at the average here, Burrow is getting 55, Trevor Lawrence is now getting 55, Jared Goff is getting 53, Herbert's getting 52. I mean, Kyler Murray's getting $46 million and Jalen Hurts is getting 51. Kirk Cousins getting $45 million a year. I apologize. I had his contract extremely wrong in my head. I think the Jalen Hurts kind of like that right there, that level, I think is where things get cut off. Is $50 million. That's where people go, seriously? But I can see him surpassing Kyler and Deshaun and Cousins and even Mahomes and Josh Allen, where he's making above or between $51 to $46 million. I think that's kind of the sweet spot, right? Where, you're not as good as Jackson or Herbert or Burrow and healthy or plenty of other guys, but he's better than Jared Goff, and Goff's getting $53 million. So, you can make an argument Purdy may ask for 55 simply because Goff's making 53. Like, that's how this all works out, right? Now, guaranteed money, you can click that, and Burrow's making 146 guaranteed. Purdy's not going to get $146 million fully guaranteed. There ain't no way in hell. Whereas Jared Goff is getting 113 guaranteed. I think if you want the perfect contract for Brock Purdy, you're looking at $48 million per year with about let's see, $48 million over the course of like 5 or 6 years with about 130 guaranteed. That gives you more than Kyler, more than Deshaun, but less and more of a guarantee than Goff gets. That makes sense to me. But time will tell. That's a whole season to go. And the window's open. And if you draft well, then it stays open for as long as you keep doing that. So we can get into that next off season towards the end of the year, but I hope you enjoyed the Tatum Bethune Scouting Report. The first 30-ish, 20 minutes of the show, and I hope you enjoyed the Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence conversation as well. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I truly appreciate it. I want to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe. We are 10 subs away from 1,000. Let's get to 1,000 before training camp. That is the hard. We better do this, or my marriage is in trouble. No, I'm just kidding. But let's hit 1,000 very, very soon. Thank you guys so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, watching, and listening. You can follow us on social media at 49ers_access. That's the X, or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. And if you want to go to the NBA Finals, if you even care about those anymore, you want to go to the MLB game where you want to buy Niner tickets or any NFL tickets, use our promo code at SeatGeek.com. It is 49ers Access, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com, and save yourself $20 off. It can buy you a beer. It can pay for part of your parking or your transportation to the stadium or the arena. It's a small discount on me, and a thank you for watching and listening to the show. That's all I got for you today. Again, like, share, subscribe, leave that review, tell your friends about the show. And until next time, as always, stay faithful.